our implementation program, how you can improve your implementation of your strategic plan by using the 6 critical capacities for strategy implementation. I know that there's people just getting onto the Zoom call or the webinar because it's, 2022 and people have back-to-back Zooms, which is excellent. So as people get into the room, I just want to welcome you. I'd love for you to put in the chat, who are you? Where are you from? What are you hoping to learn out of today? I'm going to share a couple resources for you, including how we approach strategy implementation, how we view strategy implementation. I've put a couple kind of offers in the sidebar here. If you look on the side, one is if you'd like to have a conversation after this, you can reach out to us directly. We can talk to you about your strategic plan, getting aligned first, and then talk about the implementation. I've also included one destination scorecard, which is just on the side there. And it's a really awesome tool to use with your team to quantitatively measure your alignment and quantitatively measure the environment that your team is operating in to support you being successful in your strategic plan. So that's on the right-hand side there with those little red dots. So you can check those out there. And is there anything else I'm missing? No, I think that's everything. So you might see me look over here because this is where I have my kind of console. But I'm just really excited to share because of the work that we do. So I've been facilitating strategic planning creation for the past 11 years or so, supporting leadership teams of for-profit and not-for-profit organizations around Canada, the US, and really around the world. We do that through facilitating strategy meetings, through supporting implementation development, through training. We also have a course on how to create your own strategic plan. And over the past 10 years and thousands of hours of coaching, really tried to distill everything that we know into these 2 models that you have in front of you. So the one on the left is how we view alignment and how we, focus on getting teams aligned and on the same page. We do that through our strategic alignment program, which is our 2 or 3 day kind of on-site or virtual strategic planning process. And on the right, the 6 graphics that you see, the honeycomb is how we approach capacity building and how we look at implementation. So that's really the focus of today's conversation is on the implementation. And we've had past webinars on alignment. The main thing I kind of want to share with you today is you think about getting your team to where you want it to go. So the first thing is making sure you all have a common destination, one destination of what success looks like. So that's one. So that's really like the triangle on the left. And then the other is, do you have the environment around your team, around your organization to help you accomplishing your goals? And so each of these 6 capacities that we have here, we found are fundamental to, or critical, if you will, to building that environment to help you support your organization. So it's having a strategic plan document itself is great, but that's not the only piece. You need to make sure that you have the foundational pieces to support your organization in its growth and success. We've led this with many companies. It's really cool seeing the transformation, and it truly is a transformation in terms of how they started, being unaligned or in the multiple destination trap and moving towards, accomplishing their one destination, but really putting all those systems, processes, and structures in place to support them to get to that next level. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through, and I'll answer many of these after the fact. But why don't I kind of jump into it? So what I really want to highlight today is what the critical capacities are, how they might apply to your organization, and what you want to consider as you move forward in your planning process. So a lot of people walk in and they say, hey, I need to do this 2 or 3 day strategy offsite. I need to get aligned. I need to make sure that we're on the same page. And that's important. But then also consider that there are 1,100 days of implementation so that you are also considering how you're going to move your plan forward. This is especially true of organizations that have big ambitions. If they want to grow significantly, we had a client said, I want to go from 100 million to 300 million. Well, that's significant change. So what do you need to do to put that in place so that you're successful? And so we've come up with these 6 criteria that is really an amalgamation of all the best practices that we've seen in organizations and in development and learning. And looks like it was a little bit slow on the come up here. So you're going to get a sneak picture of all of them. Okay, great. Fantastic. So the first level, as we talked about, is that alignment, making sure that you have alignment with your leadership team. So making sure everybody on your senior leadership team is aligned and on the same page. That includes you as the CEO or your executive director. That means your senior leaders and your middle managers, making sure that everybody is clear and bought into the plan. Doing strategic planning itself will help, but it won't necessarily sustain the alignment. So you need to sustain the alignment over the 3 years of your implementation. One way to think about it is if you've ever been to a motivational speaker, you'll get motivated for a couple of days and then that motivation will wane. And so as new priorities and new things come to the table, staying aligned, staying on the same page is critical. Number 2, staying aligned throughout your plan. So making sure that not only your vision is keeping you aligned, but your mission, your strategic priorities, your goals and actions. So making sure that you're developing that strategic thinking muscle as you move forward with your team. And then the third piece is cascading that down to the entire organization, making sure that everybody, top down, bottom up, is clear about where you're going, why you're going there, and how they play their part. We just had a conversation today with a team as part of the implementation plan to say, hey, how are we doing within each of our plans? How are our sub teams doing? And are the sub teams work contributing above? And how do we need to collaborate and work together on that? And it was a really valuable conversation because it was taking the time out from working on the organization or in the organization to on the organization. So that was really cool. The second critical capacity that I invite you to think about as you move forward with your team is clarity around roles and responsibilities, actions and deadlines, and the implementation plan. So another customer that we're working with, we help them develop team charters and project charters. And now they've incorporated the team charters and project charters, which you can feel free to look up, into everything they do. So that anytime they have a project, anytime they work in a sub team, they can reference and say, who's doing what, who's responsible for this, where are we at with each of these things? And it's providing the structure, not only for them to implement their plan, but to reference and allow people to succeed within. One of the biggest roadblocks to successful strategy implementation, according to a study that HBR did or Harvard did, it said, hey, if you don't have the right decision rights and you don't have the right information transfer, you're not going to be able to accomplish your plan. So what that might look like for you is if you're unsure of who's doing what, you're not sure whose responsibility this domain is, or something was supposed to get done and it never moved across the line. Those are the things that will kill your strategy implementation. If you don't have a project manager assigned to drive a large strategy transformation, you're going to have a hard time and it's going to stall at various points. So being able to have people either responsible for the strategic priorities themselves, for sub projects within it, or any other kind of change or transformational initiative is critical. And as part of the work that we do, we support in having that and also making sure that your team has accountabilities for it. The third level of capacity that I invite you to think about is communication. So if you're a senior leader, and I assert in this room you probably are, you probably spend 80% or more of your time communicating with people. And within your senior leadership team, 80% of their time is probably spent communicating. So being able to really master communication, making sure that it's effective and moving across the organization is critical. So sharing your plan, making sure that it is going top down, bottom up, making sure that you have the regular communication structures and cadences to keep your plan going. You might say, hey, like I'm out of the loop, or when was the last time I looked at this plan, or I don't know who's doing what. You might not have the right structures or cadence to support your plan. So building that in place from an operational level. And then a strategy review cycle. We have a lot of people that come to us and say, hey, we did a strategic plan like 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 8 years ago. I think it's probably still good. If you're not reviewing your strategic plan actively and you're not using the review to communicate down and change your activities, then you're missing out on huge opportunities. You're not, in fact, being strategic at that point, or you might not be. But you're not getting the most of your people because you're keeping them out of the loop. So as you are looking at saying, hey, how am I actually going to get my plan moving forward? Think to yourself, or I invite you to think about, hey, how are we going to set up and structure communication so nothing is falling through the cracks, so nobody's feeling left out, and so we're not missing any critical components as we move forward with our plan. And I'll just pause here just because I've talked a lot already. Any questions from anybody, either on the chat? I know that some of you are on YouTube and some of you are watching it in Webinar Jam. So if you have any questions, just drop them in there and just make sure I'm not going too fast, because sometimes I talk fast. So we talked about alignment, we talked about responsibilities, accountabilities, and we talked about communication for you as a CEO, or organizational lead, to look at the kind of organizational health that you have. The third piece is monitoring, tracking, and reporting. We were working with a group today, and I was saying, hey, like, are you familiar with the idea of like a scoreboard or a dashboard when you're, playing sports? I say, well, the dashboard, or the scoreboard more precisely, in a sports game tells you everything you need to know. It tells you if you're winning or losing, and it tells you how much time is left in the game. And it focuses your energy, your activity, and everything that you need to do to know if you're successful or not. But I find so many organizations don't have any kind of scoreboard to tell them if they're winning or not. And so if you want to get the best out of your people, if you want to get the best performance, if you want to make sure that you're moving your team forward, then including monitoring, tracking, and reporting, or some sort of scoreboard within your team and your strategic plan, is going to be critical. It'll help you reinforce accountability. It'll help you monitor your plan progress, and it'll help you become proactive versus reactive. So we see people who say, oh, like 10 months in, let's review our goals. Whereas really you should be reviewing them monthly and quarterly to make sure that you're actually hitting your targets and you're not ending up behind. The only reason we do this, it's just as a quick pause, the only reason we have this in place is to help you and your team get to where you want it to go. So it might occur like, oh, I have to do this stuff. I have to do this stuff. I have to do this stuff. Yes, you do, but it's really only so you can hit your goals and accomplish the outcomes that you want. So if you're a business that's at 10 million and you want to get to 20 million, well, there's certain systems, structures, processes you need to put in place to support that growth. If you want to go from 50 to 100, from 100 to 200, 200 to 300, they all require a different set of structure, systems, and processes to galvanize your team and help keep them focused. And I found in the 10 plus years I've been doing this, that for human beings to be successful, employees, middle managers, senior managers, etc., they just need a kind of set of boundary conditions and a place to play in. And so by providing this for them and by setting up the structure for them to be successful, you can be a better leader. It helps you as a CEO develop leaders within your team, so that your leaders can lead instead of having to manage and put out fires. So I just want to kind of take a quick pause on there to say, hey, like, I've seen so much value created out of this in teams because they've put guardrails for their people and team to be successful. All right. So we talked about the first four capabilities. The next is values, behavior, and culture. And we see a lot of organizations buying up companies, integrating, merging different cultures. And it can create a lot of organizational challenges, because when one group merges with another, they have different ways of doing things. They have different approaches. They have different systems. They have different ways that they've learned. And so by being able to, I will use the word homogenize that, but to integrate them more precisely, you'll be able to get the most out of all of your people. So fostering the culture that will drive performance by communicating behaviors, demonstrating behaviors, and reinforcing behaviors, and having a conversation about what those practically mean and what they can mean in teams working together. We had a group that was working together, and every leader had a different management style. And we did this workshop where we unpack the values that company talked about. And over the next 3-6 months, they were able to elevate their working styles together because they knew what it meant. We say, hey, I want direct communication. Here's what I mean by direct communication. Hey, when I say compassion, like this is kind of what I expect around compassion. And so just at the senior leadership level in this example, they were able to work better together because they knew what to expect from one another, because they had given it a word, they had given it a language, they had given it an expectation that they held each other to a certain standard. And once you raise the standard, it raises the performance. And then again, the performance is to help you get to your goals. How do you assess culture and bring it to a tangible place that you can track and monitor? That's such a great question. So one way that we do it is we look at the behaviors lived in action. So it's sort of a subjective assessment, but we review the past quarter, 6 months of work against the values and behaviors that we said, hey, like this is, are they being demonstrated? Are they being demonstrated? Where are they not being demonstrated? The other place that we look is when we're having interpersonal issues or people challenges. Then we look back and say, hey, how do those challenges and how do those behaviors align with the behaviors that we had set out? So instead of saying kind of good or bad, because it's all subjective, we say, hey, what is our desired versus actual? And we try to bring actual as close to desired as possible. The other way that we do that is when we do a stakeholder survey or stakeholder engagement sessions. We reach out to middle managers to say, hey, like, how are you feeling? How is the culture? Is the culture working? Are you happy, satisfied, engaged? Engagement, employee engagement, which is a big thing people talk about, is both cultural. Do they fit? Is there psychological safety? And then there's also strategic. Do they have the organization's stuff that they need? Do they have goals? Do they have the right support structure? Do they have the right vision? All of that stuff. So that plays into engagement. So there's a couple different things, but engagement is one way to measure, and then actual against desired is another. So Romeo, I hope that answers your question. So imagine we go through all of these areas, and we do workshops as part of our implementation plan to include these. By the way, once I'm done this, I'll tell you about how you can work with us and what it looks like in practice. But we try to develop each of these capacities at a time so as to not overload anyone. We say, hey, let's focus on this, focus on this, focus on this, do new skills, and then focus on new behaviors so that you can get new results as a team. So once we go through all 5 of those capacities over a series of months and weeks, then we focus on developing leadership and change management to sustain the change. So develop the urgency of why we should do all of these things and when and why, making sure people understand people and process. So, what are the underlying things that are going to keep this all together, and then maintaining buy-in and alignment. So being able to go through that entire process, and not as a one-time activity, but really as an ongoing process and system to keep your team engaged and bought into where you want to go. So what are the key takeaways I want you to think about from developing these capacities? So one is that creating a strategic plan and just doing the document is not enough to help get you where you want to go. 2 is anytime you're building new growth for your organization, that you need to be able to put skills and processes and behaviors behind it to sustain that new level. And the third is that it's a process. It's not just a set of activities that you can tick off. It is really like a living thing. And that the more people you add and the more complexity you add to your organization, the more important it is to make sure that you develop each of these capacities within your team. Alignment to keep people focused, responsibilities and accountabilities to make sure everybody knows who's doing what, communication, because it's the backbone for every single organization and it's the majority of what you do, monitoring and tracking and reporting to know if you're winning or not, values, behavior, and culture, because you work in an organization of people and they're guided by behaviors, and then leadership and change management, because change is not easy and somebody needs to lead it and drive it forward. And so it's a kind of simplified way of thinking about everything you need to put within your organization. But if you look at each of these areas and recognize that there's sub activities within it, you will easily stay very, very busy as you move forward with your strategic plan. So make sure you're doing the strategy implementation stuff as well as the team development pieces. So what I want to do now is just highlight that if you do want to work with us, you have to start with all of our implementation programs. We don't do any strategic planning clients without that. But we have 3 packages that you can take advantage of, depending if you're a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large business that's aiming for transformation. And the core components of each of those is you get monthly team calls, you get stakeholder engagement sessions so we can develop and work with your team. We'll include strategy reviews, training workshops, and then coaching. So depending on where you're at, the basic implementation will support you with accountability. The advanced implementation will support you with coaching. And then the transformation program will really develop all of those leadership skills, all those organizational skills to help your team really elevate to that next level and make them better leaders and managers. One of the other things I wanted to share with you, because some people like to get into like the nitty gritty of the specifics, is what are the workshops? Like, what are the things that we train on? When I started this company a long time ago, I envisioned that the world would have a big gap in terms of skills, knowledge, and experience, because there was going to be all of these, we'll call them baby boomers, but people at their later stages of their careers, they're going to be retiring and leaving. And with them is going to take a huge, create a huge gap in knowledge and a huge gap of experience. And what I'm seeing now, and you might see this as the case within your organization, is that there's people who are very, very technically good. They're good at their jobs. They've progressed, they've evolved, but they haven't necessarily got the formal education or the business experience through other means. They've just gotten there because they're good at their jobs, especially in high growth companies that have grown very, very fast. So they've never had the opportunity to develop themselves into people leaders. And so what our objective is to give not only a foundational piece of knowledge for the entire organization and these leaders, but also a common language and a common understanding that they can use to guide everything that they do. If everybody has the same language, everybody has the same understanding, then you can use the tool more effectively. Versus somebody with a lot of experience and somebody with no experience, then you have a understanding and expectation gap. So some of the things we really focus on teaching people, the ones at the top are the foundational ones. So goal setting and reviewing action planning, team communication and interdependencies, how to track and monitor your plan. So that leads into the kind of first quarter of strategy implementation, leading and cascading strategy and goals. So making sure that you get your middle managers and frontline employees engaged, developing culture, behavior, and values, stakeholder engagement and management, change management best practices, focusing on continued alignment, project management, best practices for leading meetings. And then this team building processes, best practices has come up a lot. We also do scenario planning. So if you are looking for somebody to develop a curriculum for your team to help you get to that next level, these are all the fundamental skills that I think that you need to be able to help your team accomplish that. You might want some of these, you might want all of these, but I believe that every single team is better by having an aligned understanding and clear expectation as to what their needs are. And we just finished working with a small business out in Colorado. We just finished their year of implementation, and the team is so much more confident in their ability to do this. And that's really like what's cool for us is when we work with a team, it's not to have them work with us forever. It's to build them up to a place where they say, okay, like we got this. Like, we have what we need. Our leadership team is evolved in a significant way. And now we're going to run with our strategy and then check in with you after. So it's really to build that capacity so that you can drive your plan forward and get you to where you want to go. So one of the last things I'll share with you is just kind of a gift is how we look at strategy implementation from a practical sense. So we have these broken down by package. So at a minimum level, if your team was just saying, hey, we just want to make sure that we develop our strategic robustness, at a minimum, I would say do a project call monthly internally and a quarterly strategy review, and then review your strategy once a year. What we do with our advanced implementation clients, which is the majority of our clients here, we do a balance of leadership team workshops, those monthly project calls, the quarterly strategy reviews. We also do stakeholder engagement sessions to be able to bridge in and bring in the rest of the organization. And then for the person that asked the question about culture, we do a survey at 6 months to basically see, hey, how is the change moving forward? How are people getting engaged? For our transformation clients, as I had mentioned, it's learning and development heavy. So we do a workshop every month, in addition to the monthly leadership calls or the monthly project calls and the quarterly strategy reviews. You might be thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, like that's a lot of time to be spending on doing strategy work. But the clients that want to and the companies that want to be able to move forward and accomplish those results, you got to put a lot of energy behind it. So yes, it's a lot of work, but at that level, if you're trying to grow fast, you have to develop your leadership and you have to develop the strategy. It's not all operations work. If it was, you'd already be there because you're busy as it is. So building the capacity of the business to move it forward. The last thing that I'll include is that in each of our packages, there's at least 30 hours of supplemental support time. That's either to do one-on-one conversations, ad hoc meetings, training, development, anything else that kind of falls outside of this. And that's just to really make sure that you have a partner that can work with you side by side to help you get to where you want to go. So last thing I'll say as I finish up and kind of open it up to questions is, the next step for us, if you're interested in learning more, you can go to SMEstrategy.net. You can click the strategic planning services up here to learn more, or you can send us a contact form and we can walk you through, customize what it would look like, get a better understanding of your team and their needs. That what you might need to consider as you move forward is with your strategic planning. But remember, for you, the first step is alignment, staying aligned. And then from there, building and developing not only the skills internally, but the systems and processes to implement your strategy. You can have one without the other, but you definitely won't get to where you want to go. And you definitely won't hit your goals in the amount of time that you want. So you need to put that energy to work on the business, not just in the business as you move forward. If you're interested, again, I've put in the offer sheet, you can click a link to have a call with me, or you can go through that one destination scorecard with your team to better analyze if doing strategic planning, getting aligned on one destination and moving forward to your critical capacities makes sense for you at this time. So I appreciate y'all being here today. I'm happy to open up the floor to answer any questions you might have. Whether that's about strategic planning, whether that's about the implementation or anything else you might have. Otherwise, I will let you go on with your afternoon and evening, but really appreciate you being here. Appreciate you watching and listening. My name is Anthony Taylor. I'm the managing partner at SME Strategy. Reach out to us to talk about developing partnership to get you to your one destination. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time.